Hi, everybody. This is Carmen DeValis. I'm the founder of Doggies for Dementia, and we are here today. This is called Experts Dig In with Doggies for Dementia. I don't know, Sylvia. I think that's a really cute name. I just thought it was cute. And I am here today with Sylvia Worsham, who's a friend of mine and is a wonderful coach. And beyond that, has a super big heart and great experience for us today, in both as a coach and as a caregiving daughter and beyond. And we're going to talk about relationships and that today. And so that was a teeny tiny description of for introduction to you, Sylvia, but I want you to introduce yourself a little bit more fully.
Sure. But like she said, I'm her friend. We've been friends, Carmen, I think, for a good over 3 years now, a little bit more than 3 years. And Sylvia Worsham, I'm an empowerment coach, keynote speaker, and a sales master trainer. And I have my own business here in town in Austin, Texas. And primarily I work as a coach. And I specialize a lot in turning points because that's really my area of specialty. And I help people navigate those waters of uncertainty to where they're clear on what the life that they want. So I've had several experiences in what we're going to be talking about today. My father was sick for a while. Actually, he still is, but when it happened, he was about 63 years old, and before then, my dad was a very prominent and very successful urologist in South Texas, and he was always out and about, out and about, very independent. I don't know how Carmen wants to talk about this, but I can certainly share more about that experience and what ended up happening to him and my mother and myself as being part of, in 2003, I believe, is when it actually occurred. So it's been a while.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, when we were talking, there's so much that goes into what happens when a family member becomes ill. And there's both that acute, like happens right now, and when you first hear about it, and then in the case of stroke and things. Dementia's a little slower, but there are kinds that are, are not slower. They're, more abrupt. And then, but what I really, really loved was when you were talking about how you viewed those relationships differently than you did before, and what you needed to do about that. Because I think this is a topic that is so rarely talked about, but it occurs in every single family when we're faced with a crisis. And so, yeah, let's talk about what you experienced.
Okay, so my dad had been in Vietnam, and they suspect that that's the reason why he formed a tumor at the base of his skull. And in 2001, just by fluke, they were in his clinic and they were testing out MRI machines. And in testing them out, they found the tumor, and it was at the base of the skull. And it was benign, but it was in a very particular spot. It was in a very dangerous spot, according to the doctors at the Mayo Clinic. And they were monitoring it. And then in 2003, at really the height of his practice and surgery practice, he decided to take the tumor out. And the first surgery was 8 hours long, and then the second surgery was 16 hours long. And then the next day, he had an ischemic stroke, and he lost all ability to walk, talk. I mean, it was devastating for our family because he was our hero. He was our dad. And prior to this, my parents had a very traditional Mexican marriage. My mom took care of the 3 children. She was a homemaker. And he was always out and about, always out with his friends, always party, like he was a doctor. Come on, everybody knows. And then he goes through this, right? And then he went from having a bunch of friends and really popular to not having anybody come around. And that was really devastating for him. It was a really big shift. And my mom was left to taking care of him. They were in Little Rock, Arkansas, when they took the tumor out, and that's where he spent rehab for the next 3 months. And so it was between my sister and I. My sister was in medical school at the time, and myself, I was already working and married to my first husband, I was working for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, and I took all of my vacation to go and spend it with my parents in Arkansas and just be there to support our mom, who was really devastated. She had always viewed my dad as a strong one, as the one that took care of us, a provider, and then all of a sudden everything kind of fell on her. And it was terrifying. It was a scary time. It was very fearful for her. So the daughters were there to kind of support her and to be in the supporting roles. And as time went on, of course, we couldn't stay in Little Rock, Arkansas. We were all living in South Texas at the time. My
I have,
sister was in medical
I have
school. So,
two questions before you go on,
yeah,
Sylvia. Um, did you say that they found this incidentally, like he was trying out an MRI machine in his office?
yep.
And it was
God, it was a God moment
yes.
because
Yeah.
they had not found the tumor. It had been growing slowly for many years. It had
Wow.
not impeded any part of his movements. It was just by the grace of God that they found it.
So
And
no indication. He just said, "Okay, I volunteer." And
they just asked him, "Hey, Dr. Villalobos, can you be the guinea pig?" And he said, "Sure." And they did it, and they just were like, "You have a brain tumor. Like, you have a meningoma. You have
yeah,
a meningoma." To be more specific and more, uh, yeah, just to be more specific on that.
I just got goosebumps. What a story. And
That is
then yeah, so when he opted to have the surgery, um, the the risks, of course, are there. However, the likelihood that he would just kind of sail through must have been pretty good, or he wouldn't have wanted to have it done. Is that correct?
exactly. They had pretty much said, with the problem, like when they first decided on the surgery, they hadn't seen that this tumor was wrapped around the main arteries and veins of the head.
Uh-huh.
So when they got in there, they realized that. That's why the second surgery took 16 hours long. For the last 4 hours, we didn't know if our father was still alive in surgery because nobody had bothered to come out to the waiting room to let us know. It was like the longest 16 hours of our life.
Yeah, my father had a stroke
Mm.
similar to that during open heart surgery, and
Yeah, this
you know,
was
so
the
he was
next
really
day,
close.
but still, it was like you could tell that the body had been under so much pressure. And you're a nurse practitioner, and I come from an entire family of doctors, so I know that that level of stress and that so many hours under sedation, it's going to put a lot of pressure on the body. And if you're already a 63-year-old male and your family history has stroke in it, the high likelihood that you're going to have complications is pretty high. It's
Right.
pretty, but he wanted to do it because they had explained to him at Mayo that had he allowed it to continue to grow, one day he would just not wake up
Oh, okay.
because
So
it was
that's
in a
the flip
really
side of the
particular
choice. 'Cause
part of the brain. Yeah. And it was already putting a lot of pressure on the brain, and it was the size of a golf ball is what the size of the tumor was. It's pretty big.
so
And
did your parents make the decision about surgery, or were you guys involved at all? There's three kids.
we were not involved.
Hmm.
They made the decision. It took them from 2001 when they found the tumor to 2003 and consultations with various people.
I can
And
imagine.
they found the surgeon that was highly specialized in that type of tumor.
Uh-huh.
The advantages to being a doctor, you have a lot of research and you have a lot of connections at your fingertips. And so he found the specialist that was highly specialized in that area.
Hmm. Wow.
And that's who did surgery on him, because to find him in Little Rock, Arkansas,
So
I mean,
that's why they ended up there to find
that's
this.
how he ended up.
Wow. Okay, so here's the family with good resources. Your dad
Uh-huh.
obviously well educated, and here you are as like, oh my gosh, and your mom has suddenly 100% responsibility
Mhm.
for
And
everything.
become
Hmm.
like his everything.
Yeah.
When before the dynamic was so different. He was the one that called the shots. He was the one that decided the vacations. He was the one that this was the way life was going to be. And she was very much the homemaker, uh, very much in her role with her children. And now she was the head of all the decisions, because when you become dependent on others, now the responsibility falls on them.
And she couldn't even ask him, "Honey, what do you think I should do?" Right? Because he wasn't
Well, no, because it at the start, it was just, this is what, the doctors were the ones kind of in control of, like, this is really the treatment. And my dad was still, we just couldn't understand him. He could barely move one pinky. When we finally got him to move one pinky, that was like a big deal. uh, but it was really devastating to watch, to walk in and to see the physical therapy people who, I believe me when I say this, a lot of respect for physical therapy and occupational therapists. They play an enormous role in this, especially after a stroke. Bless you all for what you do, because my father was able to walk again and talk again and speak again, even more clearly than before.
really.
The Yes, and it
That happened.
was like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, he still struggles to this day. Because when they went in through the right side to do the surgery, he lost all hearing on the right side, so his balance is off.
Wow. Okay,
But
so you guys are in Arkansas, far from
mhm,
home,
yeah,
and this crisis hits, and what happens to I mean, because each person has their own
life.
perspective of
Yeah,
what's happening.
yeah.
Not always do siblings get along. Who would have guessed? Who would have
Well,
guessed?
just for
Different
times we got along. We
opinions.
just made it work because our mother was our center and our focus. And we wanted to make sure she was well taken care of, because I could tell this was really hard on her. And as I was the oldest, and I was there the longest because my sister was in medical school, so she only had a very particular time frame that she could be there, and then she had to go back to school. And it was my brother was also in medical school at the time, and he came down for a certain period of time. And I took all my vacation and then some, to be able to be there. And then we decided as a family that it would be best for me to go back to South Texas and take care of their financial affairs and
Uh,
make sure that their home was in order. And that gave my father, um, peace, that I was able to do that. So what we did is we kind of, the times that Roxanne could be there, who is my younger sister, who's a doctor, she was there to do the nursing side of things and to help with that and to help feed him and be with him and take care of his needs. So my mom could take a break. And then I was back in South Texas making sure that his practice was still running, that his affairs were financially in order, all the bills were paid. I had power of attorney for everything. It was an interesting time, and I was still a pharmaceutical rep at the time. He was a doctor in my territory,
uh-huh.
and I saw those shifts occurring. How people
Oh,
were pretty cruel to tear someone down while they're already down. His colleagues were not very kind.
oh my
They
gosh.
they kind of were making up stories and rumors, that he was dying, that he was very critical, that he was not going to come back, and it was hard to watch because, you don't expect that of friends, quote unquote. These were people that he had spent a lot of time with and considered to be very close friends. And I was seeing all of this, and the issue that arose later was, how do I break it to him that these are not people to be trusted? These are not people that truly care about him. There were some that still cared about him, but the majority, they were pretty ugly about it. And my dad did come back to work, very limited, of course. He couldn't come back as a surgeon. That was his love of his life, was surgery, and he was very good at it. But he couldn't do that. All he could do were like lithotripsies, for example, because it only require his dominant side had not been affected by the stroke. It was only the left side, um, that lost all ability. So he was still able, and he was very, able with his mind, but his body was not as able anymore. And but it was interesting how the dynamic shifted with our parents, where now they became even closer friends than when they started their marriage almost 50 years ago. It was really neat to watch.
Yeah.
You need to.
Yeah, I think, it's a similar, different, but similar story that was my inspiration to write the story. Just See Me, the book that's behind me, that
Um,
and the families. And there was one family in particular who, Joan, and they invited me over and they go, yeah, we'd love to have our story. And she goes, you have no idea. And she goes, I think she felt like her story wasn't going to really touch anybody else's hearts, or they couldn't relate to it. And she was talking about exactly what you were, with the family, friends mostly, that just dissipated, who weren't there to support, and almost the opposite, and just kind of scattered. And how painful it was to watch that, and
yeah,
to not be able to explain that to her husband in a way that was settling at all. There was just like no good response for that,
no.
other than the truth. And I don't know what it is about it, whether it's the fear associated with an illness that,
Mhm.
brings out people's responses and however they cope. And, but I think we get wrapped up in what it feels like to see a friend suffer and not be able to relate, versus what's it like for them, that are going
And somehow I think they thought that because his movements were slow, that his mind was slow, but that was nothing
through.
of the sort.
Short positions, right?
What happens is quite the opposite, actually. They get even more lucid after a stroke.
Mhm.
And 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 it was
Yeah,
just I remember
exactly.
Joan's story because that was the one I could relate to
Uh-huh.
because I had seen it and I had lived it as a daughter, and it was really heartbreaking to watch.
Mhm.
Um, a person that had been highly successful, and if I remember correctly, Joan's husband had been a very highly successful individual himself, right? Wasn't he the head of a newspaper or uh,
Mhm.
something like
Yeah.
that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Very,
They're
like,
both,
famous, very,
yeah. They're
very
both very
significant,
accomplished. Mhm.
very
Mhm.
accomplished, very significant in their careers. And then to go from that level, it kind of reminds me of the movie Regarding Henry. If you remember that movie with Harrison Ford, is
Oh,
he's that high-powered attorney, and then everybody just kind of like leaves him, and he starts all over again. And it kind of reminded me of that uh, story. But what I loved about that movie, and I loved about my parents' relationship, is that my parents now are the closest they've ever been. They play cards, they laugh together, they are their own best friends.
mhm.
And at the end of your life, that's all you have.
Right.
At the end of your life, the love in your life is all you've got.
Mhm.
The significance due to the material things and the things that you think you acquired that mean something, they don't mean anything,
Mhm.
especially when tragedy like this strikes. And you get to know and understand people's true character when you see that occur right in front of you. You know what people are made of. Now, my father did have two very close friends that stayed his friend and still referred him patients. Unfortunately, one of them was my godfather, who passed away from cancer himself. He was a I loved him because he was the only one that supported my dad during that time, never tried to hurt him, and in fact, referred him his patients. And he was a very significant person in the community as well. So I was very grateful to him during that time. In fact, I would cry on his shoulder most days as a rep
Oh,
because I saw what was happening and I didn't know how to respond to it. And he gave me the best advice. He said, you continue being the good person that you are. You can't control what other people are doing. You can only control what you can do.
mhm.
And that was the best advice I ever received from him. And so I just stayed focused on what I could do for my parents. And I was very organized, so I could do that all day long.
That's your thing. I would be the opposite, Sylvia.
Yeah, side of things. And so we just separated our roles based on what we were good at. And that's what works for our family.
Right.
And uh, but can beautiful things happen? Yes, absolutely. Even from turning points, like major turning points like this, beautiful things can occur. Change
Mhm.
can occur in such ways that you never dreamed possible. Because I bet you my mom never dreamed she'd be that close to my dad. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And to be so accomplished then in things that she probably never imagined she would be doing if
Yeah.
your dad had taken care of it. So, so tell me about this. So one of the things, and I want you to comment on this, when I was, getting to know my families in the book, and it's way more than that, right? Because I'm visiting and photographing and getting to know them, and I'm seeing the family dynamics and the connection and the way that the love that was there, that it was like in the hardest of times that they
Mhm.
were there, like your parents, right? And then I would go home and I'd look and say, wow, I wonder, I wonder if my husband would be that way. Which is number one, if you have to ask, that's probably not a good sign, right? But then
Right.
and then I would ask him, like, when I talk about the stories, and I'm like, what do you think? How do you think how would you react if that was me? And all of our plans changed, and suddenly everything changes, and I'm not the person that I was before. I'm the same person, but I'm not how you viewed me. I can't carry on the way I am now. And the response was, I don't really know. And he got up and walked away. And I thought that was an honest response, because I
Yeah.
think a lot of us don't think about that, right?
No,
And
no.
um, I don't know, like, did you stop and look at your friends and others around you as this was going on, like to wonder like who would be there if
You know what had happened to me when I got sick with pulmonary embolisms? I saw who came and who didn't, and who stuck around and who was too afraid to discuss things with me. And it's very painful to watch who thinks more of themselves during that time versus others, how
yeah,
their focus shifts like inward and
like
becomes
their own fear, you mean?
it that they're like they become because when you get weak like that, where I would take a couple of steps and I was hyperventilating and I couldn't, it was like, and someone like me who's, I come across a room and I come across pretty powerfully. My father's, if you think I'm powerful, my father was 10 times more powerful. And to watch that, I think what happens is that people start to think about their own mortality.
Hmm.
Scares them.
Scary,
And
very
it
scary.
keeps them away because if they stand in front of you and they see it, it reminds them. And those are the times you get to see true character. You
Hmm.
know, who's going to be there and who's going to simply walk away because they're just not strong enough to be there for you. And why do you want people like that ever?
Hmm.
Honestly, they're already showing you what they're made of. You
Right,
know, the second
right.
time you're like you're the fool to like stick around them.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
It's almost like better to manage on your own
yeah.
than to be with someone who's there but turns their back, I think.
Yeah. 'Cause the interesting thing was when it happened to me, my now husband, Donnie, was my boyfriend of like 4 months during that time, and he stayed with me in the hospital the
Wow,
whole
4
time, and
months?
I was there for between 10 and 14 days. At St. Luke's Episcopal, we were in Houston, we weren't even in our home base, and it was just the 3 of us, my mom, him, and I, and that was it, and he was there the whole time, and he never left. And so
Wow.
when I look at those experiences like that, I'm thinking, well, he's definitely going to be there if the going gets rough. Because he
Mhm.
didn't leave at 3 months of getting to know me.
Uh-huh.
Why did he leave me?
We don't even let them see us without makeup in 3 months.
I mean,
Right?
I just thought that I was like, I don't want him in the room. Like, I feel nauseous. Get him out. I mean, things like that. It's like, oh
Yeah.
god,
Oh, I can't imagine. I mean, 3 months is, we're still trying
just
to
like
show our best side.
still dating. Like, oh my gosh.
Mm.
But I tell you, I think mostly um, it's tough. It is a tough time, but the best advice, because I've been on both ends of the deal. I've been the patient myself, and I've been in the family of the father who fell ill and saw everything around them. Rely on the love in your life. The family in your life. Those are the people that are going to be there, and take care of those relationships They always say the grass is greener on the other side. No, water your grass. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, and
you put in the time and the energy with the people that love you and
mhm.
give them the time and the energy and the love ultimately because when you're faced with situations like these, you're going to be very surprised at who stays and who leaves you, and it will break your heart initially, but it's a blessing because you want to know then who you can count on.
Yeah, it's about counting. So I want to say I try to take the judge because I've experienced this myself recently with cancer and surgery and isolation. During isolation, if you can imagine, diagnoses of cancer and you
Yeah,
can't have
that's
people around, so you're relying on phone calls and things. But what I found was I tried to avoid judgment other than to say, okay, they can't step up right now,
mhm,
and to look at that with compassionate eyes, and yet to say, so I know then if I really need you, that you're not the one I'm going to count
yeah.
on, and to say, and I'm okay with that,
Mhm,
and to look the who is, and for most of the people that I've interviewed and that I've talked to, it's far less than what their resources are far less than what they thought they were going to be,
mhm.
and to wrap our heads around that and to not live with the anger around it that we just got abandoned, you
You
know.
know what? I'm with you on that because there was one particular friend that very close to me that could not come and see me during the time I was ill. And it really, at the time, it was hard to swallow because this is my tennis partner and somebody that I love very much to this day. And she just couldn't. And we've talked about it on and off. I talked about it with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend was like, Sylvia, she was heartbroken when all that was happening to you. She just physically could not be there for you because she felt like she needed to be strong and she knew she was not going to be able to stay strong in front of you. She was
Uh,
going to break right in front of you. And she didn't want to do that to
right,
you. You needed strong people around you to like
right.
sustain you. And she just couldn't.
Yeah,
And
I believe
with
that
you
was
yeah,
the case with my ex-husband too. So I'm not strong enough. It's not,
yeah,
can't do it.
yeah.
Yeah. But luckily you had people who could be though. And
Mhm.
yeah, so you could look at that and just say, okay, this is what that is and
Uh-huh.
move on. I
It's
think,
not lack of love. It's just lack of
yeah. I think one of the things that I hear with families, especially with dementia, because we're talking a long course here, right? Sometimes up to 10 years or more. And people and family members too, like I want to remember them the way they were,
Mhm.
and it is too hard to see and that kind of thing, and the person who is left to do the caregiving,
Uh-huh.
they're thinking like, well, that's a luxury I don't have, to be able to say I want to remember him the way he was too,
But
and I have to live for today, right? And so it's not a valid excuse, but that's because they're the ones that two are left to
mhm,
carry um, the burden piece of it. And caregiving, there is a burden piece. I mean, it doesn't matter how much you love a person, there is a burden piece to it, and it's a willingness to take that on and to do that with love. But it's not easy,
oh
and it's
gosh,
a lot of
no.
sacrifice and changes.
And I see it with my mom at times, and she luckily has help because she's older. She needs the help because the socks that he has to wear so that they can prevent the blood clots and the struggle or whatever.
Highly elasticized.
Yeah, it's really hard to put on. So they luckily have hired somebody that it lives with them, and they can do that. But in the case that they can't, I know that some insurance companies, I don't know if they allow some help with like caregivers to come in, like nursing or
It's pretty
that will.
limited, I mean, one of the sort of I'm looking for it, thoughts that people have, this is not true about dementia care and things, is that Medicare covers everything. And in truth, it covers very little. And
Okay.
that's a myth. And so when people are like, well, but if they need memory care or something, Medicare will cover that. And that's not the case. And So some cover a certain degree of caregiving. Most pay out of pocket. And
Wow.
yes, out of pocket, and it can get expensive, and so families have to decide and make a sacrifice financially in order to save themselves emotionally and physically to take a break, even if it means they just go to another room and rest. Um,
Hmm.
because for dementia, a lot of that's 24/7. You just never know when something's going to happen, and people sleep. They say they sleep with one eye open and one eye closed, and so their sleep isn't good, and it's a constant changing, and never know one day to the next what it's going to be like. And that caregiving piece is professionals where I say you need to get some help. You need to get some help. The resources became very limited for most people.
Is
Very
it because dementia is not like an area that science is caught up with? Do you think that's why, or
for
like for medications or for like the science behind dementia and Alzheimer's? It's period. At least when I was a pharmaceutical rep, it was not an area that they put a lot of money into understanding. Is that still the case, or?
So relatively speaking, compared to other diseases, true. And that's changing. That's catching up, but it's still there's no cure. It's like we know it's a progressive disease. It gets worse over time. And the brains are so oh, you know what I have here, Sylvia? It reminds me, we were going to use this for your pictures. We have a brain. You remember? I forgot to bring this.
Like there was a brain. We're supposed to clear your brain.
Brain, yeah, are so complex, and depending on what part of the brain is affected, is then what we see as far as thinking and reasoning and insight and memory, and also
Mhm.
physical, how much physically a person's able to do. So there is a core of similarity with most people, but there's a huge amount of difference, and so every family is experiencing, not to mention their own family dynamics on top of it. And,
Mhm.
and when you're talking about long term, it's a marathon. Um, it's a big, big challenge. And I think then pretty soon, those who are able to become part of support groups and things find that get another person who really understands it is helpful for them. Then even some of their own family members who can't who say, you know what, I don't want to hear it because I want to remember them the way they were.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough one. I mean, for my parents, it's been since 2003. So you do the math. It's been
Uh,
17 years
right,
of
right.
mom doing pretty much everything. And like I said, luckily she has somebody that she can rely on, that she can do that. But it wasn't always the case
Hmm.
because it's tough.
Um,
It's tough to be around that and to be around somebody that was once one way and now is this other way. And it's a tough
to
time.
wrap your head around that, and
And yes, your life changes and it can change very dramatically. And it's really a choice you make of the life you want to lead. You
mhm,
want to lead a joyful life and focus on the love that you've always had for each other. Um, and it's funny. You can always time travel back to those days. I've time traveled back to those days with my dad. There's times I've dreamt of him like walking normally and without any issues or what have you.
mhm,
Uh, but they're rare now. I just kind of look at it as the new normal, kind of
mhm,
like COVID-19. There's a new normal. This is a new normal. And in shifting gears, you know, I, the love inside of me and the love I have for my dad is has always been the same,
mhm,
regardless of what he looks
right.
like on the bed and how he walks. And well, he talks better now than he talked before. So that's
Yeah. And and I found even with the reason it took me so long to get my book written and done, besides the fact I didn't know what I was doing when writing, I learned. But part of it was that then I would follow up a year later, and things had changed. So I would go back. And it wasn't just the decline in dementia, it was how the families learned to manage and cope and their outlook. was different than it was a year before. And that's when I got super curious and like, what do you think the difference is? And honestly, that became the inspiration to say we got to do something to raise awareness. So we've got the book, and that's how Doggies for Dementia came about. It's like, okay, we can raise awareness because the more we know, the
Mhm.
better we do. And so I'm talking like the people who are running and are afraid, and part of that is the more they understand and know, the more open.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, there, when you asked about are we catching up in that sense, yes,
Mhm.
we're, and even the Doggies for Dementia is a piece of that. What are we doing to contribute to that knowledge? Are experts digging in? We're talking about it. We're actually talking about this is hard with relationships and families, and how do we do it? And that was not always the case before.
Mhm.
It just not discussed and openly.
And that's good. So it's a step forward. It's
Yeah.
a step forward in discussing this is what happened in our family. It might happen in yours. You
Hmm.
know, my
Yeah.
biggest takeaway was we each focus on the strength of the other.
Hmm.
Whoever was
Yeah.
strong in an area, that's the area that we're put in my family. Because to try to do something that you're not truly comfortable in, like they tried me at nursing and I just failed miserably. And I think Roxanne's a much better fit here. And so she ended up doing the nursing part. I mean, she was a medical student at the time, so this was her strength. Um,
And you were
and
okay with that. You were, as a part of that is acknowledging, say, hey, you know what? This is not my thing. I'm not good at this. What else can I do? And
yeah,
I think that's
yeah,
a big,
to
huge
help.
lesson. And
Yeah.
then that's okay because not everybody's good at everything. And it's
Because sometimes,
okay.
we know that when stress gets really high, people get overly sensitive and the ego comes into play. And
Yeah.
this is the coaching part that I didn't know then that I know now. I could just easily step away from like remove the ego completely from the equation and say, like you said earlier, what else can I do to bring value to you? Because this is out of my wheelhouse, not my strength,
Mhm.
but I know I'm strong here. Can I help you here? Can I
Right.
help you in the organization of your financial affairs? Would that give you peace and most likelihood, yes, because
Yes.
you need someone you can trust implicitly with that. And who better than, their children to manage that for them and
Yeah.
not a stranger.
That's huge. It's huge. That's
That's
transcendent to say, okay, I'm I'm not I can't handle this, but I can handle that. And I can't tell you the amount of guilt and shame I would hear from families going, I should be able to do this. I'm like, says who? you know, it is not for everybody. What
and and as a
you
reminder,
should.
shame and guilt are two of the most worthless feelings out there. They
Mhm.
are they will keep you stuck in a horrible state. Uh,
Yes.
forgive yourself, give yourself grace,
Mhm.
and especially during times of stress like this, and realize that you have a very unique set of gifts inside of you, and this is what they're meant for.
Mhm.
Times like these.
I wish I understood that far better as a practitioner. I understood it to a point, but I really got the message when I talked to people when I was no longer their clinician. And they,
Uh-huh.
I was really afraid to tell you because I thought that if you saw I couldn't manage it, that you would suggest placement or that my mom has to go to a nursing home or whatever it was, the story built around it. So I always pretended that I could manage it just fine, even when I was falling apart.
Mhm.
And I thought that fear around not being good enough and like power I didn't have. And like you do realize I didn't have that power to
Mhm.
make you do anything. And our response would have been, let's look at where we can fill in so that you can still live the life you want and the place you want and not hurt you in the making of that.
Because
So
we know, and we know that the adaptability piece is huge during these times.
yes.
Like adaptability is a big skill, and it's a skill I was very good at. So when stuff like this happens, like turning points like these, where there's a major shift going on in relationships and your health, um, like was the case here, you know that that is going to be critical to be able to adapt very, very quickly to that situation and say, all right, I'm a extra set of hands. I'm here to help. I love you. And with love and honesty in your voice, just address your family members like that. Because when they're faced, I know that when I was faced and as a patient, that's all you want to hear is
Uh-huh.
how can I bring value to you?
Right. Yeah.
Even just being a friend is
Right.
good enough for some people. It's
Yes.
all you need is someone to listen to them and talk to them. And again, I'll say this again, like for your doggies for dementia, people that are going through people like Joan, they can reach out to me and I can certainly sit with them and coach them through hard times, especially during this time.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for all you've added to this today because I think just alone that tiny nugget of it's okay not to be 100% at everything is huge,
Yeah,
huge. Not to mention all the other great information. So I know what you've had to share has been wonderful. And before I invite you to offer anything to our audience, I'm going to ask you one other question. I
sure.
don't think you need your brain for this. You. The question is, when was the last time that you felt truly in awe of something?
In awe of something.
Hmm. In awe, and you're just like,
It's been very recently ago, um, a very tender moment here at the house. In these times of COVID-19, this is the side of this pandemic that's been very beautiful. Is our family enjoying a game night, which we had not enjoyed. I can't remember the last time. And just sitting there and just taking that moment in where we were playing keepy uppy because it was a game that my daughter, my 5 year old, decided to play. And it's to keep a balloon up in the air and don't let it drop. And we were having the best time of our lives, to the point where we were laughing to the point of crying. And it was a moment of awe of like, wow, a pandemic. We're in the middle of a pandemic. People are dying. It's hard. It's a hard time, but our family is reuniting and connecting in ways that I am just so grateful for.
mhm.
It has been so amazing to watch.
And it's
Like,
the simple stuff, right? I mean, you're tossing a balloon in the air and playing with your kids and
and laughing out loud because we're looking up in the air and we're tripping over stuff in the living room, and it's the simplest of things that we
laughing.
completely overlooked, that this pandemic is giving us such a gift.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
time that we're spending with our families, just game night, whatever it is, the simplest of games will
Oh,
bring, and you see it and you see everybody laughing, and it was amazing. That's
that is beautiful. That's beautiful. And I want to thank you for being my guest today. And
I love
um,
being your guest. Wonderful person. I've always said it. You have this light inside of you. It's
oh,
very contagious, and
thank you.
I love it.
Thank
So
you. Thank you. And it just means so much for me. And to have just these candid conversations, I know that it can help other people too. And I want to close out here soon, but I know you talked about, so Sylvia is a coach,
mhm.
and I want you just to share a little bit. We're going to have it in the comments too. How can people find you?
Well, my webpage is sylviaworsham.com, and when you get to my webpage, there's various ways of getting in contact with me. All the way on the bottom of my page, you'll see all my social media networks, and I belong to all of them. I'm on Instagram, Facebook page, so you can find me on Sylvia Worsham on Facebook. Um, and I have a Focus Friday video series that I do on YouTube, and the link is on my webpage, directly on my webpage. And just go click there, and it's all sorts of videos on different topics of empowerment, leadership, and sales. But most especially right now in empowerment because of COVID-19, you'll see a lot of videos on that. So Focus Fridays, it comes out on Fridays, of course.
Well,
I'm focused on your personal growth, and I'm here to help anybody out. If you comment on those videos and you say, if you want me to create a video on any question you may have, leave me a question on there, and I'll create an entire video just to help you out with
that's
strategy.
wonderful. Okay, so all of my listeners there, you can go there then. Focus Fridays are great, by the way. And, I ask people to always comment and like and subscribe, especially as we're just getting started. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking of all the times I've listened to yours and I've subscribed, but I haven't commented. And like, why not? That's just
And
oh,
and
but I love
whatever
them. So
I love creating content, and I wouldn't mind spending an hour or two creating the content for one of your readers that is really struggling with an area of their life
oh,
and giving strategies in response to that question. So
all right, you guys, listen to that. Sylvia means it, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And we'll share them to our page too for Doggies for Dementia. It's a great, great thing. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. It's been so much fun chatting. And I know we can often go off all over the place, but we did pretty good today. We did pretty
yes,
good today. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Hey, yeah, we're geniuses. We're okay.
Some things, yes, because we've learned now to know what we're good at and what we're like not so much. Yeah.
That's okay. That's on her. That's her strength over there.
Yeah.
I refer when it's not mine. I'm like, there you go.
There you
She's
go.
stronger than I am. So
Yeah. 'Cause you're the organizer. I'm not so much. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you again. And thank you for everybody for listening. Be sure and subscribe and comment and like, and then show some love to Sylvia too, because there's some great information there. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye.